ready, we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order. October 27th, 4 p.m. First item on the agenda is discussion of the new high school architects.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And it's an exciting day. We started out, we had invited our guests down today from Morris Torrent. Kelly and Stacy, it's good to have you here back in Martin County. And was able to have lunch with them over at a local establishment and then did a site visit. A couple of, Gary was up there, and Roger King was able to come up there. The site is beautiful, but I won't take away any of the thunder from our two board members. They're just excited as we are as well. But having said all of that, I'll just turn it over to our guests here, Kelly and Stacy.
Thank you guys for allowing us to come down and meet with you and giving us your time. We are very excited, and I will apologize up front. Ron Merle, who was also with us during the interview, and my principal in charge, was planning to be with us this evening and ended up with a tooth emergency, so he had to stay back at the last minute, but he would have also loved to be here. Our goal for getting in front of you all today was just, I guess, to kick off the project, have some discussion about, I guess, give you an overview of what to expect as we go through the design process, answer questions that you might have, and then really focus on the programming part of the design process, because that's the phase that we're getting ready to jump into, and let you know some of the ideas we have on making that a really beneficial part of the project, and see how you feel about those ideas. So I just wanted to start by I guess reminding you what we've done to date, which is approved the BG1. That is your project application, which the state has seen and approved. So on that, it basically just opens up a file, for them to track the project development, and it kind of gives them an idea of what you're aiming for, which you'll recall at this point, we've identified that the goal would be a 700 student high school, common spaces for 1,000, as well as hopefully building the Career and Technical Center as a part of that. And on the back side is, it sort of outlines for the state the budget that you have for that project and how you plan to apply those funds. So I believe you all actually have a bonding potential of about $32 million, but you'll see sort of the total project cost there at the bottom. We've kind of held back a little bit, so we don't want to overextend you before we even really jump into the design process. So we are aiming for a total construction cost of 26, and then you can kind of see how the soft costs add up to the remainder of the project budget. So if you have any questions about that, just stop me and holler at me at any time, but I just wanted you to see what we've been working on as sort of our framework, just to stay with it. These next two forms, the BG2 and 3, are also documents that we'll bring to you throughout the design process. They are forms that the state requires that you see and approve, so that they know that you're having, the level of oversight that you deserve in your project process. So I did want to kind of just go through the 5 steps of the design and construction process, and again, just kind of let you know how it will unfold. And like I mentioned, we're getting ready to really jump into the programming part, which programming is actually a really important part that you take the time to do right, and that's where we will meet with various staff members and community members and anyone that you all designate that is, to provide us input, and we will start to sort of build the project with words. We will set goals, identify spaces and sizes, and at the end of that process, we will actually, I guess I should have put these in a slightly different order, but we'll end up with a document that looks like this. This is not a high school program, but it is an example of what you all will see once we've gone through that process. And what we've got here is kind of 2 columns, one that outlines the state's minimum guidelines, and then the second column, we always end up tailoring this sort of model program to be specific to each individual school and how you guys want your instruction to take place and what your actual needs are. So that's what we're shooting for. Once we have established that is when we can actually take all those words and start to make them into pictures. And so we'll take all of these spaces and begin to do a schematic floor plan. We'll probably bring you multiple options to choose from. And then we'll nail down, you know, the idea in schematics is to get all of the adjacencies correct. And make sure that the building is going to, you know, function in the way that it needs to. Then we move into the next phase. And design development is when you kind of take that floor plan that's somewhat, it's diagrammatic, and you start to really flesh it out with decisions about your building systems, you know, how I know energy efficiency is going to be a big deal. So we'll be making those kind of decisions together. We'll be choosing materials, finishes, and that is where this BG2 form will come into play. And so at each one of these phases is when we will stop and come to the board for an approval of what's been done to date. And then that approval will be submitted to the Department of Education for their review as well. So as part of the approval of the design development process, we will bring to you the BG2 and the BG3. And that allows you to see all of the specific choices that have been made as far as, like I said, your materials, your finishes. There's a significant portion of the document that identifies your goals as far as energy consumption and how efficient the building is going to be. And they want to know, you know, all of that as they're going through the process with you. So we will bring a BG2, and then a BG3 is when we start to become even more defined with your cost opinion. And we'll constantly be updating you on where we stand from a budget standpoint. If we start to make decisions that are, you know, pushing the boundary of what we can afford, then we'll come to you and discuss that. There might be decisions, you know, that value engineering, but we kind of work back and forth together throughout the process to make sure we stay within your framework. So you might see a lot of us in the next several months as we're kind of going through these steps. Then once we get to construction documents, and I'm not sure if I put this on your all's agenda, but we get to construction documents, we might not be quite as present for a couple of months because that's when we go back to our office and we take all the decisions that have been made and we really start to translate that into a set of drawings and specifications that are biddable. All of these steps that I've kind of talked to you about so far generally take about a year from today until the point where we can put that project on the street and get bids. Usually actually takes about 12 months to go through that process. But that's another decision that we'll be working back and forth with you guys on. We are willing and ready to keep up as fast as you guys, you know, can facilitate. So I just wanted you to kind of have a good idea of what we're looking at heading into. Then once we are able to complete those documents and get contractors on board, it will probably take about 22 to 24 months to actually construct. So it's a long process, but like I
That's
said.
what you're talking about, 3 years total, if you did it.
Right.
If we did the planning, in less than a year.
Exactly.
Yeah, have you worked with any school districts that have done it the last time?
Absolutely. One project we did in Perry County is a really good example of just a very accelerated design phase. And like I was saying, we can absolutely do that as long as all the pieces fall into place.
Okay, like for example, Perry County, how long? Yeah, how long?
It's an extreme example.
Huh?
So,
Yeah, and it was not my personal project, so I can't,
And so you're saying extreme, like in how short a term?
as in about 3 to 6 months. The construction documents, yeah, it was,
Well, like 6 months or something that's attainable, would you think?
But I will,
If you can move that fast,
yeah.
we're gonna be asking a lot of you.
Because there are decisions that, have to be in place before we can, move on. And I will, I guess, sort of add a disclaimer that Perry County did also spend 5 years finding their site before we, so it was still actually a long
Well,
time.
that's the way with us, I mean, we've had the site for a while, right? And I mean, there's a lot of things that we're kind of eager,
Yeah,
I don't think it's years. Dave Higgins with MTA, he's still on.
mhm,
Okay.
absolutely. And so the only thing then to consider is to make sure that we can get the design documents done, as quickly as possible, but then you want to make sure you're coming out of the ground at the right time as well, and finishing that project at an optimum time to move in, so that it's not just kind of sitting there, unused for a certain period of time. So,
Scott County, which kind of sounds like putting the cart before the horse, but which we can do also. It's like, I guess their design process is running from now until July. And then their preparation is running from October 2015 until January 2016. We think it will be reversed, but so we can basically go forward like that, okay?
So, all of that, sort of, I'm just kind of talking in loose terms right now until we identify more specifics as far as your,
So a lot of it,
real
though,
time.
you're doing your site preparation while you're doing your design too.
That is,
That's it.
yes, that is very doable, and that is something that we've done on a number of projects. Once the schematics are pretty well set, you know that footprint, then you are able to kind of proceed with getting the building pad ready, getting utilities, even you can do an early foundation package. So all of that we can do to aid in trying to speed the process along. Okay, so I wanted you, again, because I know we went over some of that information at our interview, but it's been months, and I always just like people to kind of, I take for granted sometimes, what we do every day that people are kind of not as familiar with. So, do you have any other questions about?
How do
Okay.
y'all feel about the site?
I think it's beautiful.
Do you like the site?
I think it's,
Oh, okay, compared to other places we've built schools, like, flat land and, things like this. Do you think this is a site that offers a lot of, like, options for expansion and things like that? I mean, some of the things that we would want to do outside the school, say with athletic complex.
I do think that this site gives a lot of opportunity. I mean, the fact that we have an opportunity for, a flat rock-bearing, building pad, it's fantastic. Yes, I mean, just the amount of space that's available to work with. And it, it's very scenic. It's just, it's nice to kind of have a clean slate to start on.
It's
not always the case.
As far as in eastern Kentucky, I don't know about other areas of the state, western, but I haven't seen any comparable. I don't know if there's, the new B.O.E. County High School, what kind of site they have, but from a golf, but I don't see any around here that's comparable to that site that we've chosen.
That'd be a site for your, like, showpiece, built by Ross Tarn.
Yeah.
That's good.
So, that was kind of the dry stuff, but I do, like I said, want to really focus on the programming process and kind of tell you guys some ideas we have on really taking advantage of the opportunity to get your community excited about this project. Not that I'm sure they are already, but to actually get them involved and on board. Because the more information that we can collect about what people want to see in this building, just what people here value and what defines Martin County, we want to start hearing all of that so that we can start to translate it into what this building is going to become. So we'd really like to begin what we call some temperature taking exercises, and I guess in a number of different locations, start to put fun opportunities out there for people to provide feedback. And Stacy's going to talk about another interesting opportunity as well, but I want to give you some examples, and then, maybe you'll even have some ideas. But one thing that we talked about is you have in your packet this sort of banner. We've got some better templates over there. We think that it would be, I guess, and let me preface this as well, because it might scare you to think about just inviting like this, open input from all of the community, and how are we gonna, kind of funnel and control that input. So that is the idea, is that we are gonna kind of solicit on a broad spectrum, just ideas and thoughts from a lot of your community members, but throughout this whole process, it's all gonna sort of channel back to the board. So we'll be hearing a lot of stuff that we'll discuss with a planning committee that you guys will be able to put together, and then that planning committee will be making recommendations that then come, to you all for the final approval. So we'd love to start by maybe putting something in the high school as well as the middle school, because when we talk about the couple of years out that this project is going to be, some of those students that are going to be walking in the front doors on the first day aren't in a high school right now, they're in the middle school. So we would like to put something in maybe the lunchroom that just gets them excited about, hey, this is really happening, and hear what their thoughts are on what I imagine Martin County's new high school, the most important thing to me is, and just let them brainstorm and write what comes to mind. And believe it or not, those kind of responses can be really helpful to us. And our thought was, we've just been brainstorming on how can we make the most out of this opportunity, is that we would start with something, kind of broad like this, see what kind of feedback that we get, and then based on that, maybe a couple months later, come back with a new banner that's maybe a little bit more specific and in response to something that we've read or heard, and allow them a new opportunity for more input. That's one idea. Another is that we
Can I elaborate on
please.
that just a little bit? This banner concept is actually designed, this is a mini version of a banner that would literally be 7 feet long and 3 feet tall. This would be plastered on the wall in the cafeteria so that kids can actually go up with Sharpies. And we were thinking the cafeteria would be an ideal location because that's a place that's monitored regularly, and that kids can have guidance and help with that if they need it or are asking for more information about it. But it's also a nice public space where they can talk to each other and think about what they envision for the new environment that they're going to go to high school in. And it could range actually in responses from, I want to have an awesome basketball court to I want a place that feels like home. So we're talking about things that can describe individual spaces, if that's what's most important to kids, or things that may be more emotionally based, things that, they want bright colors and something that, like I said, feels like home. And all of those things are going to generate concepts that are really helpful to the design team as they're moving forward. It also, as Kelly mentioned, gives students an opportunity to have a really meaningful contribution to what is going to be their environment in the future, and gets them engaged in the process and involved in a way that oftentimes they don't get the opportunity to do. So it's kind of an interesting, I think, concept for that.
So will this banner be placed, at the high school and the middle school both? Is that correct?
That's what we were thinking, and all of this is, of course, just a proposal to you for how we might go about involving kids, but we were thinking both places would be possible. And depending on the types of responses that these elicit, if there are things, you'll start to see themes emerge. Lots of kids talking about the same kinds of concepts, and if they start talking about things that really are of interest to you to hear more about, we can actually generate then a second banner and put it up that says, tell us more about X, Y, Z, and give them a chance to dive a little deeper and tell us more. It's potentially something that we could use over the course of several weeks.
So, and then, but of course, like we were mentioning, we do want to give the students these kind of opportunities that maybe aren't typically, given to them. But we also want the rest of the community to also feel invested. Because high school is something that serves the whole community, not just the students attending class there that day. So we talked about some other opportunities, maybe here in the board office, to provide a similar type of activity, that allows feedback, or even in the community center. Another example is, and Stacy brought some actual, like, life-size templates, but is these sort of postcards from the future. And it might sound like a funny activity, but it's something that we have done on some of our higher education, post-secondary projects before, and basically asking people to consider that they are writing themselves a letter 5 years from now. So the future them writing a letter to the current them. I'm saying that backwards, aren't I?
No, you're right.
Okay. And they're telling themselves about the new facility when they walk in it for the first time. And the beauty of that kind of activity is that it encourages them to sort of think outside of the box and really visualize what it could be. Because a lot of times people have, it's easy for them to think about what they currently have and how that could be better, but they don't immediately try to just think of something different, And so this helps them think of just all the possibilities and not just, what they're used to. So that's one activity, and even what we thought, again, like Stacy said, only proposals of ideas that you guys can or cannot agree with. They even thought about, if you really do want to get some excitement, going in the community about the fact that we're really getting off the ground, could even have a town hall type meeting and allow people to come and ask questions and share ideas, and that would be a great forum to roll out an activity like this, because we could explain it to them, in person, what we're kind of hoping that they'll gain and that we'll gain from it. And then it's like a little station that we could leave set up there for a number of weeks. And
Yeah, well, I think it'd be great to do something like that at INS, Sheldon Clark High School, you know what I mean? And at Warfield Middle School. Would you think so, Kathleen? It'd be good to have,
Yes.
those type of, like a town hall type thing. On, both sides of the hill. I mean, you get a lot of people at Warfield, you get a lot of people at INS both have come out. And if we wanted to extend it maybe to Eden too, so you kind of get all over the county, Eden Elementary,
We would encourage you to consider using this beyond students as well. If this was a box, for example, we would have a box where these could be dropped into the mailbox when they're completed, with a stack of these on top for anyone in the community to respond. And there's actually a place at the bottom.
Yeah, there's a place at the bottom where I saw this where you're a student.
So you guys, when you get this information, and we will actually tabulate all of this and deliver the results to you in a format that you can easily digest and see what kinds of information has been collected. But that will also give you some, I think, pretty valuable perspective on where those comments are coming from. Parents may feel very differently about exactly the same issue as children, and then you will have that information to determine what direction that needs to go.
exactly. And then another, these are, like Stacy said, can be emotional responses or very specific responses in regard to a particular space. But another thing that we definitely want to hear from people about is what they'd like to see this facility look like. And so another good temperature taking type of activity that we've done in the past is to create some type of board or display that has various images of all different types of architectural styles. Not even necessarily have to be limited to school buildings, but just allow people to sort of respond to what they do and don't like. And we have put, the various images and then given whoever is participating in this activity, you know, a number of sticky dots, and then they can go and sort of like vote for the ones that they like. Because there's all kinds of possibilities out there as far as what we can design, but we want it to be, you know, what this community wants to see. And so that is another thing that we'd love to do at some point in time. But, you know, as you kind of heard me talk about, there's the programming process and then there's the schematic floor plan. So we do have some time before we start to actually see this thing come to life in a 3D standpoint. That might be an activity for down the road, but just something to think about.
There's could y'all build Grant County High School? Okay, yeah, there's, I don't know if it's a library or just like a common area that has like a, oh yeah, beautiful. I mean, you know, that caught my eye. I mean, you have the lighting and stuff up above. It's a lot like a mall color. Really super sharp. I mean, when I looked at that, that was, and I'm not, you know, I'm just a guy. I mean, you know, I'm not really into, you know, design, but I thought that was, I thought that was beautiful.
That's a great example of an image that we could put on a board, and if everyone's responding to it, that really helps drive the design.
Yeah, that was, I mean, super nice, super nice. I mean, I remember all of that out of everything that I looked at. You all have done some great work, but that one room on the inside I thought was just a very, very pleasant place that you'd want to go read or, you know, just do whatever.
Let's see what else we. So we talked about the potential for the town hall type meeting, and I think that's great. That might be one of our next steps then, you know, to again, just sort of get everybody excited and announce that we're getting the ball rolling. But as I mentioned, we definitely want to control, you know, the message and sort of be able to make sense out of all the feedback that we're getting. So we would encourage you to establish a planning committee that we can talk with throughout the programming phase and get more specific input about what's needed at the school. In your packet is an example of people that typically make up the planning committee. You basically just want to have every area of school life represented. You don't want it to be, you know, an unmanageable size committee. Maybe 20, you know, people might be a good figure to shoot for, but you definitely want to have, you know, food service, technology, every aspect of what's going to affect what this facility turns into ought to have a representative.
Like custodial staff.
Absolutely. And we'll even have, you know, detailed meetings where we sit down with that staff and talk about, you know, down to the flush valves, you know, what they want to see and how the facility should operate. But they should be represented on the larger committee as well. And as a part of that planning committee, we would recommend that there's even a smaller, maybe 5, 6 individuals who make up a steering committee, who can even, you know, continue to kind of take the larger message and just make the more defined decisions as far as giving us direction. And then again, as I mentioned, even what we hear from the steering committee will ultimately be brought to you all for approval. So we wanted to just encourage that and let you think about it, who might be the appropriate individuals to be on that committee. And then we would like to encourage everyone, you know, who has an investment in the new facility to do research on your own, because we do want to take this to the next level and not just make what you have better, but really give you and your students, you know, opportunities for the future. So it, you know, we want to encourage you all to look at trends in education, trends in educational design. Definitely, we'd love to go on some tours with you and kind of see what strikes you, what you respond to. And then, lastly, I guess, as we kind of hear all this information from the community, we would love a way to communicate back that they're being heard and kind of share information with them. So Stacy's got, I guess, sort of a prototype of a Facebook page that we would like to propose, that we set up and manage on behalf of you all to sort of provide periodic updates, share
Okay, so it's
information.
like a face, I'm sorry, go
No,
ahead.
no, no, no.
No, the Facebook page, is that something that's kind of new, okay, that you're all doing, or have you done this with other schools?
Never done it before.
Never done it before, well, great.
Never done it before. It's a, you know, Kelly did a really good job, I think, of describing the planning exercise as, or the planning phase, the programming phase. I can't type in cough at the same time. But you can imagine, you know, she was describing it as a funnel, and it really is. It's a process where you're starting with the entire community of voices, all of which have things to say, and that goes into what then the planning committee has to distill down into a unified direction and give that direction to the steering committee, who then has to gel all of that into eventually a recommendation to you. So one of the things that's challenging, I think, is when you have all those voices providing input, making sure that those folks feel heard. And one way that you can do that is by keeping everybody in the loop of what's going on and what you're doing with their information.
So social media.
Social media
Great
is where
for
it's at. It's where it's at. People are tuned in to that, you know, kind of instant feedback. So what we have here, first of all, let me tell you, this isn't published. You can see that note on there. This isn't something that's up and running. It's just a proposal for one way that you might communicate back to the community. And what we've done here is we've branded it. You can see the RT in the corner. We've branded it as a Ross Torrent page. And there are a couple reasons for that. I think the biggest is if we brand it as a Ross Torrent initiative, it keeps things focused on the design of the school. Whereas if it's branded as a Martin County Schools initiative, you're going to end up with conversations that just go all over the place. And so that's the big reason. What we can do with this page, are you all Facebook users?
Well,
Everybody pretty much has
Well, to a
some
degree,
experience.
yeah.
So not only will we, right now the only images we have are from our initial interview, so that's what you see on here right now, but eventually we'll have tons of images that will span the gamut from kids writing what their thoughts are on the banners at school to folks at the community forum, if we hold a community forum, any of the things that happen during this initial planning. You can demonstrate that you're listening by posting that information and images of what's happening on this page. So that's nice. When you develop, let me think what else. In addition to that and the images that you can put on here, you can also put out messages about if there is going to be a community forum, then you can actually create an event on this page and send it out to everybody who's following and say, everybody come out and talk to us about this particular issue that we're interested in. As there are updates once we get into the schematic design phase, Kelly's going to be producing for you some pretty renderings of what this school is going to look like once we get to that stage of the game, to give everybody an idea of the direction that this is going. Those images can go on here. So there's just a lot of opportunity for you to put messages out about how the design is going. One thing you get to decide is Facebook is one of those things that, you know, people can comment all over the place.
Yeah.
And you get to decide whether you want this to serve as the loop back to folks and you control all of the information that's generated, where, you know, we are putting messages out there for folks to see and respond to, but not to comment on this page. So it would essentially be a closed page where we're delivering information. Alternatively, you can have it so that it's wide open and anybody who wants to can say anything they want to on the site. There are good things and bad things about that. If there's someone who has an axe to grind, obviously they can use a site like this as an opportunity for creating their own platform. However, if there is someone, or if there is a large constituency that has significant gripes about one thing or another, and you know they have something to say about it, this does give you an opportunity to understand exactly what those are and address them appropriately. So I think, you know, that level of openness is something that we'll want to discuss as we decide whether to move forward with the Facebook site as a conduit for information back. And you may have experiences, I know Martin County Schools has a Facebook page, and you may already have experiences with how well or not well that's going and what you like or don't like, and we can weigh that into the conversation if we decide to go this route as well.
I like Facebook. I mean, I like this. I mean, do you like, I like it. Yeah, I do like the social media. I mean, you're gonna get, if people say, well, I didn't have a chance to have any kind of input, so, if you did, you just missed it up. I mean, you just missed it.
There are people who aren't on Facebook, so, I guess I want to caution you not to assume that this will be the only
No.
means by which you need to put a message out. You'll still want to do traditional advertising in the paper for events and anything that any other ways that you typically, notes and backpacks, to reach families and parents and community members. But it is, for folks who are really into social media, it's a great way to get just a blip, a quick, bit of information about the status of things and keep people aware that even though they may not be invited to a forum every single week, there is progress being made, and that, I think, is very important.
I wish you could pull up that. Well, no. Yeah, I wish you could pull up that. Can you pull that up real quick, or probably not? Well, you can get that thing that I was talking about in Grant County.
Well, I mean, is that one on our website?
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Well, it
I couldn't remember if it was.
Absolutely, well, I can show y'all later, but it is absolutely, it is beautiful.
That is,
I'm glad you like it. So, circling back around so that's sort of the vision for how all the information might be collected, distilled into a unified view and developed during the programming phase. What you all get to decide, and the hardest thing I think that you get to decide, is how you want to comprise the committees that are going to drive the process.
Mm-hmm.
And the page that Kelly gave you, I think, is a really great way to start thinking about the folks who can lead each of those efforts. What you're looking for in committee members who are going to yield the best project are folks who are really open-minded, good communicators, organized enough to be able to hear what other people are saying and assimilate all of those bits of feedback into a voice that can drive the process. Folks that aren't so organized, or maybe are coming to the table with a real preconceived agenda, you might want to, certainly you don't want to discount anyone, everyone will be involved in the process, but you might want to consider that and those types of personalities as you're looking for a group that will really drive things well.
So that was a lot of information in a short amount of time. Do you guys have any thoughts, questions? I assume, have any of you guys gone through a construction project like this?
No.
Okay, so
No.
at any time, feel free to contact us with questions or concerns, and we'll be glad to explain.
I talked to Ron Mural about building this. He said his specialty is roofs, I guess.
He is pretty,
He was and I asked him, I said, can you build us a school where the roof will not leak for 20 years? And he said, yeah, you can do it. And he talked about PVC roofing, which I've never heard of before.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, I think we'd have to get some kind of a state waiver on the PVC, panels, so for the roof, and the blown in, there's concrete.
it's a lot of concrete. Yeah, Ron is a huge fan, and I'm not saying just, him, it's a great system, and we do a lot of it, lightweight concrete, so it's a low slope roof.
Yeah.
And then the PVC is just a single ply membrane, that's
He said it's
usually,
impenetrable.
it's, yes, so usually, the roof itself, you're not gonna get a leak, but you gotta very well detail, those edge conditions and penetrations to make sure that you're not gonna get water in there, but Yeah, it's a great system. It's a very efficient, system as far as the installation value of the concrete.
They
and
talk
the-
about it having a very high R
Yeah.
value.
And then we usually, the membrane itself is white, so it, reflects the heat back off the building, and that's definitely something I'm sure he'll be encouraging you guys to think about. But, we know that people also have a lot of ideas about what they expect to see, and you might have people who are fans of, pitched, metal roof, and we'll take all of that into consideration. But yeah, energy efficiency, is going to be a huge part of this whole process, I'm sure. So do you guys have any thoughts on
Net zero.
that?
I mean, yeah, that's the, from talking to, Mr. Higgins, that's on the thing, it's doable, and it can be done. Now, I want the building to be aesthetically pleasing, but I also want it to be, I want it to be a showplace as far as something that is, state of the art. I mean, I want a building that can produce as much electricity as what it consumes. I think that would be, not only would it be a good, it's good from an economic standpoint, but I think it would also be good for, our scientists. The one in Warren County actually where kids monitor the building. I mean, they monitor the energy usage. They have, all kinds of, it's built into the science and all that stuff. Yeah, I think that'd be great. Too, I mean, think of the advantage of actually being, say, a student who is in electricity or electronics or something like that, to work in a place where they actually see all this stuff in progress, and be something that's incorporated in our APC. So, I think that's, yeah. But that's the reason I asked, Mr. Wiggins. And you all come very, very highly, or Mr. Higgins, I'm sorry, not Wiggins. I have to read that. You all come very, very highly recommended by him.
That's wonderful.
He's very high on. I know he works for 5 other companies, so I got to make sure. But yeah, he was.
Well, and I'm excited to hear what you're saying.
Yeah, the grants. Yeah, and the grants to make it a possibility. Yeah, the grants, and I don't think the grants should be any problems. I mean, it's it's kind of an unusual thing. For this reason here. I mean, I understand. I'm doing it for money reasons. Because, I mean, if we can cut our electrical costs, anytime this, like right now building a school, anytime our power bill goes up, we have to raise taxes or cut services to kids. And anything that we can do to eliminate that cost, I mean, we should do. And you don't get a chance to build a school every 4 or 5 years.
So is Clark County the rain harvesting?
There's
Clark
gray
County
water.
does Yep.
The rain harvesting with that?
Yeah.
They use it they're harvesting rainwater and they're irrigating their green roof that's over their science wing. So they have 2 science classrooms that walk out onto a green roof, and they use that as part of their curriculum.
Yeah. Yeah, see, those are things that I'd like for, our teachers to look at, our science teachers, things to look at, what can we do to, to make this workable and, doable.
So how do they feel about the rain harvesting? Feedback?
I know I could probably.
Well, from what I understand, the rain harvesting, you use that for flushing toilets.
They don't on that scale for this facility.
Okay,
For
they
this
don't do that.
facility, rather than pumping water up there to irrigate the plants that are growing on their green roof, they're harvesting enough to be able to do all of their irrigation for their science program. So you can, although I don't know of a school in the state that has actually harvested enough rainwater to be able to supply all of their restrooms or.
Okay, well, Yeah, it's not a big deal. That's not a big deal.
But that, thinking outside the box like that, like Kelly said, and really being open to those kinds of innovations is pretty phenomenal, and we don't get to see that every day,
No,
so that's
and
exciting.
it's so exciting to me because that is the part about my job that I get the most excited about, is the fact that the building itself can actually not just be a room for kids to learn in, but like actually be a tool that they can use in the
Yeah.
curriculum and learn from.
That's,
And then it makes us feel like we're doing something really,
yeah, well, that's the whole concept with the, the net zero. Even the thing that, I spoke to Mr. Higgins about, as I spoke to one of y'all about the western exposure, to the sun. As far as that you want to eliminate that because of, your high cost of cooling and things like that. So, y'all talked about the way that the building would be situated, but the last time that we met, that site up there is going to be basically the same thing, right? It's going to be an east-west or north-south configuration. I can't remember exactly
the
what.
building will stretch from east to west. You want the longer axis along the east-west so that you're actually having the majority of your face point north and south, if that makes sense. Because then you can get your indirect sunlight on the north side, and then you have very direct sunlight on the south, but we usually control that with sunshades and things of that sort to kind of filter the light that's coming through, but you can make the most out of the orientation that way.
Okay,
The
so-
thing to think about, I think, at this stage of the game, in terms of net zero, is whether we ultimately put solar panels on this building or not, which is what it takes to make it net zero. We want it to be so efficient regardless that,
Yeah.
so.
Well, from what I can understand, the panels that you put on the roof they're not, they're just laid out in pads. I mean, it's not something like that. It's just something that's just rolled out. Is that correct? It's not
There's
a,
all different kinds. There's
Yeah.
the film, and at Richardsville Elementary in Warren County, for example, they use the film that you roll out.
yeah,
I
the
think
film.
in that building, the surface of the roof surface was not sufficient to actually provide the space that they needed for all their panels, so they added some additional ones that were out.
Yeah, they
in the
had
parking
some
lot.
on the, outside, I think okay, but now, how much bigger would this be than Richardsville Elementary? Richardsville Elementary,
That is
about
a
500 enrollment.
It's about 5, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna be between 700 to 1,000.
Right, and the
It's a
high
high
school in
school.
general, yeah, is going to be greater square footage per student. So I can't really say for sure how big Richardsville is. But I think when we sort of did some exercises during the interview process, I think we were coming up with around 150,000 square feet, just ballpark, for your facility. I mean, it's substantial, and the really challenging, I guess, part for us, which we like a challenge, so I'm not,
Yeah.
shying away, but is going to be incorporating the ATC
Yeah,
into
Yeah, I
the net
understand, yeah.
zero.
yeah, which I talked to, Mr. Higgins, he said that, the net zero high school, the ATC makes it, a big challenge.
Yeah.
And I'd say there's not any net zero high schools, to my knowledge, that have been built. I know that they've got some net zero schools they got in Texas and things like that, but it would be nice to be the first.
Yes, it would.
It'd be nice to be the first.
We've talked, with you guys about being the best high school in the state, but imagine, on a national scale, to
On a
be the
national
first.
scale, yeah.
It's,
Well, when I talked to Mr. Higgins, I think that's something that you all would like to do.
Are you kidding?
That you all would like to build the nation's first. Well, here's the question I asked him. I said, look, I know you got like 5 companies that you work for, like having 5 girlfriends. You know what I mean? Who would you select to build the nation's first net zero high school? Who would do it? And I figured, he said, probably Sherman Carter Barnhart, because they built the one in Warren County. But he said Ross Tarrant. And I said, okay, that's good. And it's important to me. I mean, it's, you know, it's important to me from a cost, you know, perspective, that's it. And not only cost, but just to have something that's unique to our area, have something that's unique.
It would put you on the map, for
Yeah,
sure.
put you on the map.
I have another nice one.
For all the right
I mean,
reasons.
Yeah.
is there reasons that not done it is
Well-
cost?
That's a good question. I mean, I will say, I don't believe that designing to this, to be net zero ready is going to be, you know, a premium or cost you more. There's not, it's really probably the renewable energy source that scares people budget-wise, you know, because that is an extra cost, and rarely do people have, you know, the additional funds for it, but there are opportunities out there to seek grants, and I don't know, can answer that question, because it is a goal that's kind of like, why wouldn't you?
Yeah. And you're the grant lady, right? You're the one that can get
Yes.
grants. So you want, you know, as long as you get, you know, as long as we get the grants, I think it's, you know, even if it looks, even maybe because, I'm sure it has to do with the energy consumption. I mean, because with, you know, at the ATC, you're gonna have arc welders, you're gonna have a lot of additional things that you don't have in the elementary school. But it's still attainable, I think. I think it's still attainable. I think it's something. I mean, I went as far as, you know, to ask Mr. Higgins, what kind of maintenance? And he said your annual rainfall should cover all the maintenance that you have. Like a waterfall, you know, the water on the thing. And I asked him about the position. That side up there is absolutely excellent as far as positioning to the sun and everything that you have. So that's.
So the challenging part, though, is that there will be some sort of cultural shifts as far as getting people on board operationally, you know, to really maximize the energy savings, and because you're going to have to make decisions down to the point of, instead of a electric water fountain that cools, you know, the water, we would just have, you know, a room temperature water fountain. You're saving energy to that extent. And a lot of times it's difficult for food service staff to sort of make some of the changes that they're used to preparing food one way, and you do have to consider some more efficient means of food preparation in the kitchen. That's kind of difficult. It's not difficult, but it's difficult to convince someone to kind of make changes in the way they're used to operating. So we'll have to make sure that we can, you know, just sort of get everyone on board with.
Which I understand, you know, the thing, you know, the reason that Boyd County High School, Sherman Carter Barnhart had built that, is that the net zero was not a big concern to the community. So I understand that you got to have it from our, you know, on the, you know, the
Right, there's a buy-in that, you know.
yeah, but I mean, I like it I like it simply because it's a really, really good thing, and simply because of its uniqueness. I mean, it's something that sets us apart. So, yeah, yeah, I like that.
Well, I mean, while I've got you on here, what other thoughts, comments? Do you have any specific goals, you know, that you'd like to see the new school achieve?
I just want, you know, like you guys, help us make the community feel like this is their, not just the kids, but the people community, this is their high school. Something
Yeah.
they can take pride in. It's like we talked about, the hall of memories. So I want to get everybody kind of involved in, you know, your social studies department, maybe with the historical society to do research, and, you know, hall of memories consist not just athletes, but military, business leaders, whatever, you know, but to get everybody involved in this project. And they could say that we had a part. I want everybody to feel like they had a part in this new high school.
How do you feel about some of the exercises that we've talked about this evening? Do you like those ideas, have reservations about some of those ideas?
I like everything John proposed. I mean, I like the Facebook, community town hall meetings and everything. I think the more input, the better.
Exactly, because when we're done, we want this building to just be so specific to Martin County that, it wouldn't go anywhere else. It has to just, this has to be its place, and it has to be kind of built out of that, so. It's very, very exciting to be getting started, and we are just really looking forward to working with you guys.
We'll look forward. Judge Slack, the guy who was here, he's your interior designer from Painesville. I asked him if he'd build us a school that would make us the envy of this area, including Johnson County and Painesville. He said, yeah. He said, yeah. So yeah.
All right, well, thank you guys.
A couple of things. Today's October 27th. Okay, probably the biggest inquiry that the community has is what kind of timeline are we? And I know you touched upon that early in the conversation here. But that's probably what the board is getting is what kind of timeline? Are we going to see this? So you've touched upon, from the start to the programming, the design, construction, and just ballpark.
About 3
looks
years,
like about
right?
17, 18, a turnkey possibly somewhere in the 17, 18. And that's something that we need to convey early to the community board. So we'd like to get something out there, not, where they're going to be held contractually to a timeline, but we do need to get something out in our community about some kind of timeline that we're working on.
Okay.
Just starting from today, that's what I'm going to begin building. It's just, I'd like to see something on the website or your Facebook to where there's kind of a moving timeline. October the 27th, I don't know what you would call this, first program meeting, whatever, site visit, you did a site visit today. And then I know that, and I'll just share with the board, and you already know this, because of our diagnostic review, our next meeting for that with Carolyn Spangler is November the 6th. So if it pleases the board, we can put about 15 minutes or 20 minutes into that November the 6th meeting to talk about some next steps like the planning committee and the steering committee. But those are the kinds of things that I can coordinate with you and
Okay.
when we're going to meet next and talk about when can we see the Facebook activated. There will be a link on our website, as I understand, to that Facebook
That's correct.
account. Okay.
I mean, and if you guys are all on board, which is this sense I'm getting, then that can be active tomorrow.
Yes.
I think sooner we can get the community to have some input.
Okay.
I think our community needs some input.
And as far as the year of planning that y'all talked about, that could be like Perry, one in Perry County,
Well-
about 6 months, but it could be between 6 months and.
It could, and so what I would encourage, I would rather give people a worst case scenario and then, and
Yeah, it'd be the
surprise
short-
them happily,
Performance.
right, then overpromise and underdeliver. So I would suggest that if we're going to put a timeline out there for folks, that we start with that 12-month,
Yeah,
and then just.
and then 2 years, okay, then 2
Yeah.
years to finish, which we said is about 3
And
years.
in that 12 months, I mean, it can, the site preparation can begin within that 12 months
Right.
of where we did a site visit today at Holly Bush. I mean, it doesn't mean that 12 months of the design phase would prevent any type of site
Yeah, site
preparation.
prep.
So
Exactly. There
yeah,
can
that can be
overlap.
going on as well.
Yeah, well, that's, yeah.
Like you said, this is a one-time deal, and we want to hit a baseball by home run.
Exactly. So we certainly don't want to miss any opportunities to move the process along, but we also want to take the time to do it right.
Yeah.
So, Okay, that's what we'll start with.
With your direction, we're prepared to have banners in the mail to you next week to hang at the schools and begin, right?
Yeah.
And begin getting that information, and then we can also put these together and get those out into the community at the locations that you choose for those to be. So as soon as you want to be, and I completely agree that the community needs to start getting involved and engaged and feeling that momentum as soon as possible.
Community walls or.
Right.
We need to.
And that would certainly help, because, I mean, there's been a lot of talk of, you know, a school's never gonna happen, and, you know,
Or
things.
are we still gonna build a request that comes out, are you still gonna build a new school? You know, so we don't need, you know.
Mhm.
What we'll do on our end, or working with you, is some of the photos taken today of the site, how it's evolved. That would help, and I think most of the community understands that it's going to be at the Holly Bush site.
Promotion is a big thing.
Yeah, conceptual drawings, I know we talked about that when I came down to visit with you. Even if it's work that you have done, is it possible to bring some of those conceptual drawings in? We'd like to have some at the community center, some in our schools, some at middle school and the high school. But we'd like to have those, if it's possible, to have those large enough to where they're viewed by a, standing crowd kind of, not
Yeah,
the
maybe
8 by
kind of-
10 glossies, but
Yeah,
more
kind
of the
okay, you
boards
talk
that you brought in the presentation.
like,
Mhm.
like, like suggestions, this is
Right,
with the mountain and everything removed in the school center.
it can be any of those conceptual drawings, and from up there, what you've already presented to the board. It could be from work that you've already done, from like Clark County. It can be conceptual drawings, with the, IP, the intellectual property there and all, or whatever, but we'd like to see those in the community. That creates excitement, it
Sure.
creates energy, and just anticipation. So,
Just
and
that-
from that, I know it was mentioned today in discussion, I think may have been mentioned here once as well, the board should consider conducting some site visits when you go on a field trip, for instance. You don't have to go, as a board, I would not recommend that, but maybe one or two to a site, take a road trip. I wouldn't mind driving, wherever it's located. Of course, we're at the eastern seaboard of Kentucky. It might be an overnight trip or something, but we need to consider that as a next step. So just give us a listing and maybe, even some websites that we can easily get to, and maybe schedule some, and board on November the 6th, we'll touch upon that too, a little bit, if that's okay, Craig, about maybe going on some field trips, looking at some of the work that Ross Tarn's done. I've been to Clark County many times, and when I think about Clark County, I think about that open outdoor classroom. It's just beautiful. So that's something that Kelly was alluded to a moment ago about being unique to Martin County. I mean, this is a school that, it's unique to Martin County. It should reflect and represent the values, beliefs, and culture, the heritage of Martin County. So that'll last a lot longer than just your, cracker box school.
When people walk in, I want them to just see.
Activities for kids, where we give them design paper, and middle school kids design, what you guys design a school that you
Absolutely.
see in the future for your, that you want to go, that you want to be.
We'll put out some information on those, the PR media that you have there, but if you put it on your Facebook, kind of describe what they're for.
Mhm.
The banners in the schools, the index cards that are available there. And that way, we'll put it up there on our website as well, on the front page, and link, of course, to Facebook. They'll also give the community and our school communities what they're there for.
Perfect.
We can even have a school raising day.
At the next meeting also, board, just to share with you, we'll talk about, we have, just thinking about committees that we already have together, like our budget committee, our facilities planning committee, our strategic planning committee. There's 3 or 4 committees that we already have together, but, we'll solicit, between now and November 6th, I'll put out a solicitation for membership to this, especially what they brought to the table already for the planning committee. It could be members of SBDM, it could be, members of the community, parent involvement, student voice, of course, we always are pretty good at getting student voice on that. But we'll get those things together, I'll bring it back to the table on November the 6th, and again, we'll take about 30 minutes of our time on that evening. Talk about this. I guess about the only next steps I have.
Huh?
Any other next steps, board, that you'd like to see
I do what?
come back, next steps between now and November 6th? That's when we'll come together as a board. Again, I think the timeline is important. I think that's something that the community wants to see, just loosely, what kind of timeline it is.
Okay, we'll look at it.
Conceptual renderings.
Yeah, I agree, that's important. Yeah, if you have something, yeah, you can envision something. Anything except yellow brick, right? No yellow brick.
And Stacy, you mentioned a moment ago the engagement to that Facebook, to where people can leave comments and ideas and suggestions. And I'm not a Facebook guru, but you're able to screen?
Yes, sure.
Okay, good. That it's not immediately visible when somebody posts something, but, you want to make sure, I think the board, between now and the time we meet again, if you're going to make this active, I think the board would trust your instincts on the types of comments. If you enable something like that, interactive, that we would expect you to screen those.
Well, like if somebody got on there and wrote, well, we don't need a new high
Does that
school,
make
they should have
sense?
did this, that, and that. I mean, that's not,
get that.
yeah.
One of the things that okay, so in terms of sort of the nitty gritty of how you can control things, we have two options. We have three options. One is to keep it totally closed, so we put out the information and people receive it. There isn't an opportunity for comment at all. The second one is we can put out information and folks can comment in response to that information, but they can't just go on there and post something of their own or their own images or any of that. And then the third, and I'm sorry, with that commenting, there is a filter for profanity.
Yeah.
And you can type in keywords that you're sensitive to. There is not a way for when people respond to something that we have posted, for it to come to me first as moderator to okay that it shows up, which is what I was really hoping it would do. It does not do that. So this would be something, I would get notified that someone has posted something, but it would be public, and I would have a chance to retract it as quickly as I can retract it if it happens to be something that the board is not okay with. But that gets into a gray area of how, I would be happy to use my own judgment, but I definitely would not want to censor things that you didn't want censored, and I kind of think that maybe to start out, we keep it closed. That would be my
That would be the
recommendation.
best. I really do.
Do you think so?
Yes.
Don't have these be excused, can we go ahead and adjourn? And
Yes.
if we want to have some other comments, we can hang around, if that's okay. Need a motion to adjourn?
I'll make that motion.
Have a motion, need a second?
I'll say.
Motion second, all in favor, indicate by saying aye. Aye. Okay, stand adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.